This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist. Because we're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/stopthestigma for their first ever State of Stigma report, the latest in mental health research.
Hello and welcome to the Locker Room to Boardroom podcast. My name is Ryan Blake. I'm the founder and director of Ryan Blake Performance Coaching, as well as the host of this show. The mission of this is to empower high-performing sports industry executives and directors to elevate their leadership through enhanced mindset, well-being and lifestyle solutions, helping minimize stress and maximize fulfillment to reach peak performance by leveraging the insights, experiences and strategies of real-world professionals. The vision of this is to become a go-to resource for sports industry leaders, providing actionable strategies to overcome challenges and solve problems without sacrificing personal priorities, aiming to cultivate a community of sports executives and directors who can effectively bridge the gap between sports and business leadership, ultimately living better to lead better. In this episode, I'm speaking with Nigel Briers. Nigel is an ex-professional cricket player and captain, ex-director of sport and currently a cricket professional at a major UK private school. We discuss what leadership means to him, the best example of leadership he's come across, what can be the cost of bad leadership, what parts does he consider mindset, well-being and lifestyle to play in leadership and why, and what his key piece of advice is to making someone a better leader in the sports industry. Right, let's get started. Nigel, welcome to the show. Please can you start by giving everyone an introduction to your professional background and experience?
Delighted to be here, Ryan, anyway. I spent 25 years as a professional cricket player with Leicestershire. During that period, I was also employed with some teaching in the winter time at Ludgrove School, which was a prep school in Berkshire. They were very good to me there and gave me some work. And then when I finished playing cricket, I had a job as a phys ed teacher, and I was in the admissions department actually at Marlborough College. They gave me a role there. And then after about 10 years, I became director of sport. And you end up doing A levels and as well as the normal phys ed lessons and that. And I was head of cricket there as well. So quite varied job. And after 19 years, then I had a call from St Paul's School, and I thought, oh, that's a new challenge. And I took that up and did something similar, head of cricket, and then did director of sport role again for 6 years full time. So now I'm just part-time with doing cricket coaching up at St Paul's School.
So with all your experience in professional sport and in education, what does leadership mean to you?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting term, leadership, isn't it? I sometimes think because I've dealt with fitness and delivering what the components of fitness are, I think leadership's multifaceted as well and has different components. Because I knew I was going to speak to you, I tried to come up with like a definition of leadership, because it's not that easy, is it? And I looked at this and I wrote down here, leadership is empowering and inspiring the people you lead with integrity and empathy in order to maximize their potential within an environment that requires teamwork from all concerned to achieve successful goals. It's quite a long sentence, isn't it? But I was sort of thinking, like about the components of leadership and try to come up with just one long, it was more like a paragraph, isn't it, really? But I think in there, I've sort of mentioned the words integrity, which is about honesty and transparency. I think that's really important because that also develops respect and trust with the people around you. The other thing is it makes you feel better about yourself. Because if you're delivering in the values and in the right way and with integrity, I think you feel good about yourself. And I think feeling good about yourself, and we'll probably talk about that later, is really important. Also, pick out the other words, empathy, about caring for people within your team. Um, I think if you care, they work harder. And it's interesting because on a different level, my dad was the captain of the local cricket team, and I'm sure I picked up some of his mannerisms and the way he went about things. Um, and I remember one of his in his team years later, after my father had passed away, he I bumped into this gentleman, and he said, "You know what, your dad, he was great. He didn't talk so much about the cricket then. He said to me, he said, he always asked me about my family. He always asked me about my daughters. How are your daughters? How's your family? How's this?" And he was so taken with that. And a couple of times when I bumped into him, he sort of reminded me again about what he said. And I think that resonated with me. And it sort of added to my background and understanding of leadership, I think, to some extent.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. With everything you've experienced, all the environments you've been in, and all the people you've met, what would you say that the best examples of leadership are that you've seen?
Yeah. I was thinking at one of the schools I taught at, I went to see the headmaster, family community, um, and I had to go and tell him I was going to get divorced, you see. And I felt a bit nervous about this because I was quite new to the job, and I went in and he's quite an imposing character. And I said, like I understand, it's a family community and all this. I said, but unfortunately, I'm going to get divorced. And he puffed on his pipe and he went to me. He said, "Do you want a gin?" It was like 10:30 in the morning, and that little moment, it just broke the ice and made and empowered me, if you like, because I've used that term within that definition. And I sort of relaxed immediately, and it was reassuring, and I thought that was a nice moment. I'm not saying that's like a leadership moment, but little moments like that from your boss make you feel good. I think I think one of the best leadership moments was playing for Leicestershire, and we're playing Essex in a county championship game at home. And Essex are powering on the runs. I can't remember the exact score, 470, 500 for four or five. And at tea time, and we've been fielding all day, I sit down with a cup of tea and a scone, and the manager comes and sits next to me. And the manager at the time was Bobby Simpson, who was like a great Australian cricketer, manager. He was very successful in those areas, and he was our coach at Leicester. And I looked at him and I said, "Well, what do we do next?" And he went to me, "Well, what do you think? What do you think you should do next?" And I can't remember the exact detail, but I said to him, "Well, I think we should bowl so and so the top end, so and so the bottom end. We'll have this field and that." Sounds pretty good to me, mate. Like this, you see. So, was that a good Australian accent?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
very good.
And now, whether he thought that, whether he agreed with that, or what I was doing, I don't know. But he just empowered. He empowered me to make me feel good about myself. I was the captain. We're struggling out there, but he made me feel good about myself and what to do. And I thought that was a really good piece of leadership. He didn't tell me what to do,
Mhm.
but he sort of made me think about it.
Brilliant.
Mm.
So, just on the flip side, what do you think, or what have you experienced the cost of bad leadership to be?
Yes, possibly the opposite of some of the stuff I've already mentioned,
Yeah.
like where you're not straight with people or um you're not feeling for those people, you're not caring, showing empathy for them. Um, I think sometimes leaders or the so-called leaders talk a lot but don't listen as much as perhaps they should do. They need to listen, they need to hear. And that's not just listening here, it's perception as well of what your group is like or what your organization is up to. And I think within that also, I'm a great believer that if you can get the right people in the right jobs and in the right positions, um, having already set up a foundation and show them what the objectives are and the standards, then you can get them, give them the wings to fly a little bit. Let them, don't micromanage them. I think that can be a poor side of leadership if you micromanage people. Um, and also don't try and change things too quickly. If you suddenly become the leader of a group or an organization, is just get to know the organization. I mean, I guess sometimes there's urgency to do that.
Mhm.
But I think also, yeah, don't try and do too much. Take it in, nip and tuck a bit, get a feel for the people that's in the group, get a feel for the organization or whatever it is, and then maybe deal with it gradually and or bring in your own main points after a while.
Brilliant. So, as you know, the foundations of everything I do are set around three things, which are mindset, well-being, and lifestyle. I just wanted to ask you about each of those three things separately. So we'll start with mindset. Like, what role do you consider that to play in
Well,
leadership?
yeah, I think it plays a massive role. Um, I think I like the idea of growth mindset,
Yeah.
um, where you mistakes can make you stronger.
Mhm.
But I think importantly, you've got to analyze your own abilities. You've got to work out what are you good at, um, and obviously don't be afraid to employ people who are better than you in certain areas and things like that. Um, I think because you've got to analyze your own abilities as well as those that are in your in
Mm.
your group or in your organization. So that mindset of working out how to deal with them individually or
Mhm.
as a group, and you may have to change your leadership style a little bit in order to get the best out of them. And I think, I talked about maximizing potential in my um, description there of what I think leadership is. So, because all of that will influence your decision making, it will influence how you solve problems. And also, you want your group to solve problems as well. It
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily just about you and your mindset. And I think by them solving problems, they become more resilient in themselves.
Mhm.
And you definitely need that.
Yeah.
So, in order to having a few problems and them solving them in your group, um, and don't be afraid to make mistakes either, I think. I think the key thing is to have that foundation and then letting your individuals, as I've said before, let them
Mm.
give them the wings to fly a bit.
Brilliant. So the next one is well-being, and this is something which obviously quite a lot of leaders that I've met have sacrificed. What part do you consider that to play in leadership?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so much spoken about well-being now, isn't there, in
Mm.
this day and age, and Um, I think when I look back at my time at Marlborough College as a director of sport in this boarding environment, you were basically yes, you got decent holidays. It was a bit of you're either really full on and then you had time off. And um, the thing is, you've got to realize if you're constantly in busy mode, your physical and mental health will suffer. And there's no doubt about that. And I think, like when I look back, I sometimes wonder if I could have dealt with things slightly differently, or did it affect me in any way? I think because I believe in the work ethic, and I think you need to be the best you can be every single day,
Mhm.
but at the same time, you've got to find something that helps balance those things out. Now, during my time there, um, I keep doing this towards the window because the college is over there, and I'm sitting here, and I'm sort of, yeah, it's during my time there, I had a black lab, and it made me get up every morning a little bit earlier, and I had to go and get out and walk and get out into nature and the fresh air. And the same later in the day, I'd have to walk him again because he needed it.
Mhm.
And I think although I didn't specifically buy the dog to do that, when I look back, I think that was a really good thing for me because I lived on my own, and he was good company, but it made me get out. It made me switch off from the things that I was doing. And I think you have to find things like that. I think it's very tricky these days with the demands of the work environment. And if you've got a young family and young children and trying to balance all that together,
Mhm.
I think it's really tricky. And you've just got to find what works for you, what works best for you. And I think looking back, I had to take him out, and I think that probably was quite good for my mental health back then, even though I didn't specifically think
Of
about it
course.
at the time.
Brilliant. It's funny how people get lost in leadership sometimes, isn't it? And I guess that's why we're having this discussion, just to kind of dive into those foundations of what can help. And it's not always the obvious thing. So the last thing I just wanted to talk to you about was lifestyle. What role does that have in leadership, or what role does leadership have in lifestyle?
Well, I think that lifestyle thing comes in again with like the well-being. Um, I mean, I think I've always tried to keep myself physically fit.
Mhm.
Um, making sure you eat the right food, and I'm stating pretty much perhaps the obvious here. But I think getting enough sleep as well, and when you're in a leadership role and you've had a tricky day, sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night and you think about it, and it doesn't matter how tough you are. Um, I think if you've had to make a tough decision about somebody or something's happened, it it comes to it can sometimes wake you up in the middle of the night, and somehow you've got to find processes to sort of deal with that or switch off before you go to sleep, because that's the last thing you want really, because that will create stress.
Yeah.
And as we know, stress not is not that healthy for you.
Mhm.
So yeah, that sort of lifestyle is really important, isn't it? Where you balance everything together.
Yeah.
Now, how do you do that? I mean, I'm not sure. Everyone's different, aren't they? So you've got to find your own way, I think, with that one.
It is very much an individualized approach, isn't it? It's very hard to have long-term success with a general structure to leadership.
Yeah, well, the long-term success comes from putting the hours in, from your
Mhm.
work ethic, and self-preservation is really important as part of that process.
Yeah, of course. So just to kind of wrap this conversation up, what would your kind of key piece of takeaway advice be to help make someone a better leader in the sports industry, whether they're an executive, a director, or a coach?
We're all different. We all have different personalities and we all have different abilities and qualities. And I think bringing your own qualities and personality to the job.
Mhm.
A few of the things I've spoken about this morning, you can read about these, can't you? You can look them up and you can read about, but actually, do you deliver that? Do you deliver those? And are you natural with it? And I think personality is a big part of that. And I don't think you should try and be someone else. You can read about different leadership leaders and leadership styles, but just be yourself, and adapt your style according to the group that you're with, and be aware of, what makes perhaps a good leader. The empathy, the integrity, the honesty, and all those things, and realize you're not going to please everyone. And I think sometimes, and you asked me earlier about what might be poor leadership. I tend to think that don't try and be too nice as well. And especially at the start of your reign as the leader or whatever it is. It's like being nice doesn't necessarily make you a good leader. Sometimes you've got to take tough decisions.
Well, look, thank you so much for sharing everything. That's really, really insightful. And I think a lot of listeners are going to get huge amounts of value out of this. For those listening who maybe wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way they could do that?
Via email. I mean, my personal email is nigelbriers55@gmail.com.
Well, Nigel, thank you again for your time. It's been a pleasure to have you on, and have a great day. Thanks for listening to the episode. I hope you enjoyed the show. It would be really helpful if you please leave a rating and or review on whatever platform you're listening on. Is there someone you know who would benefit from hearing what you've just heard? Then help them out by sending a link. Be sure to check out the website www.ryanblakeperformancecoaching.com that has details about free tools which include the RBPC blog, more information about this podcast, taking the Performance Profile Online Assessment, joining the Sports Leadership Online Community, the Elite Impact Online Education course, the Elite Potential Online Coaching Program, the Elite Influence In-Person Consultancy, and how to get in touch if you have any questions. Follow on social media at LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads, Facebook and YouTube. Links to these can be found at the bottom of all website pages and via any search engine. Until next time, take care.